is Linda from the Campus Kitchen's National Office. Thanks so much for listening to our recording of our April webinar. Because this week's webinar is so close to our upcoming Food Waste and Hunger Summit, we have decided to do a recording that you can listen to at any time as opposed to a live training, in hopes that we will see most of you in just a little over a week. So this month our topic is engaging community volunteers, in hopes that many of you will be able to use some of the tips and tricks and resources we'll be sharing to engage non-student volunteers if you're operating over the summer. So without further ado, I am going to turn things over to Andrea, Lindsay, our AmeriCorps VISTA and our national office here in DC, who will be leading this training.
Thanks, Linda. So as Linda said, today we're going to talk about mobilizing community volunteers, particularly with an eye towards covering shifts so that you can maintain operations over summer break. But that being said, we'll start by talking a bit about all the different ways in which community volunteers can be helpful, and then really take a step back to think about volunteer mobilization more generally and go through some new resources that we have available on the pantry now that can help you not only recruit and train community volunteers, but can also strengthen your student volunteer system. So the first question is, who are community volunteers? Basically, non-students. So that could be retired people looking for another way to get involved, church or youth groups. It might be people on campus, like staff, dining, or other staff and professors. Could be high school students, either individually or as part of some sort of club, National Honor Society, something like that. Maybe summer youth programs, or even adult day programs. There are really a lot of different ways that people can find out about your campus kitchen and get involved either as individuals or as groups. And so that brings us to the next question, which is, why would you need to work with community volunteers? So again, the reason we're doing this webinar now is that a lot of campus kitchens are looking for additional support over the summer when most students are gone. And now is really the time to start recruiting those community volunteers who are going to get you through the summer months. So the first few reasons you might need community volunteers are project sustainability, both for your ongoing operations and for any additional programs that you want to maintain over the summer or other breaks. You also might have some sort of leadership vacuum over the summer and need some people who can take on additional responsibility beyond just covering your regular shifts. But in addition to needing people to fill in for your regular shifts and leadership roles over breaks, you may find some other advantages to working with community volunteers. And so Paige from Washington and Lee is going to share some of her observations about the value of working with community members more broadly.
Great. Hi. Yeah. So this is Paige Missel from the Campus Kitchen at Washington and Lee. So we use community volunteers in a lot of different ways. So as Andrea said, over the summers, we use some folks in cooking shifts, but also we do our summer backpack program, which kind of fills in the needs for the school year backpack program, and we use community volunteers to kind of load up the food and bring it out to the communities. And also in our mobile pantry sites are actually predominantly run by community volunteers. So they've been really crucial in kind of starting the program because each community is very unique in their needs, and they're very helpful in kind of teaching everyone, including myself, about the needs of the community. So for the volunteers themselves, so you can have kind of student volunteers and community volunteers going out to do different projects. And it's super beneficial, I think, for students to really connect with the community volunteers in the way of working alongside rather than just kind of serving the community. So yeah, that's kind of how we do it at Washington and Lee.
Great. Thank you so much, Paige. Yeah, so you can really improve your programs if you have community members involved in delivering some of the programs in their own community, and then again, improve the experience for all of the volunteers who can learn from each other. Finally, bringing in members of the community to volunteer is also just a way to raise awareness about your work by getting more people involved. And you never know what kind of opportunities that could lead to in terms of additional resources and partnerships. So now that we know who you might be looking for and some of the reasons for working with community volunteers, let's talk about how you actually go about getting them involved. So I'm going to take this opportunity to share some new resources with you that can actually be applied to all types of volunteers. But there are also some templates and examples specifically for community volunteers that I'll be sure to highlight. And I've developed these new resources based on what I learned in an online volunteer mobilization course that I just did as part of my VISTA service. So some of them may provide a more formal structure than you're used to using when working with volunteers, but as we like to say, running a campus kitchen is really like running a nonprofit. And so I do encourage you to experiment with some more formal planning for your volunteer program and see if that can really help you not only find more volunteers, but also keep people more engaged and staying involved over time. So I'm going to show you some screenshots of the pantry and what you can find there now. So here in the Volunteers and Leadership Teams section, there's now an overview page, which is what I'm showing you here. And this outlines volunteer management as a basic 4-step process, which starts with writing really clear position descriptions, then making a plan for recruiting and modifying those position descriptions into various types of recruitment messages, then screening or interviewing potential volunteers to match them with the right roles, and finally some sort of plan for orientation and training. So the volunteer management document that I've circled here explains all of these steps and has a whole variety of examples and templates, which you can also find separately in particular places on the pantry, which I'll show you. And also on this page are the separate sections of that document broken out to explain each step in the process. So now I'm going to take you to the volunteer recruitment page, which you'll find under the Volunteers tab here. And just to kind of introduce this process, for campus kitchens, there are basically 3 different types of recruitment. So one is going to be your ongoing publicity work, which is basically just getting your name out there so that people can come to you if they're interested in what you're doing, and then you can connect them with volunteer opportunities. Another is the recruitment that you're going to do for your ongoing operations shift. So beyond just saying, hey, we're the campus kitchen, this is what we do, putting out information about your regular shifts and information for people to sign up for those. And then the third is a more targeted recruitment process, which is when you think about particular times or shifts when you know you'll need more people, or when you know you need volunteers with particular experience or skills, and you go about recruiting for those times or roles in particular. So I'm not going to talk too much about ongoing publicity right now, although spreading awareness about your campus kitchen can definitely help you bring in more community volunteers. But we're going to focus on some more specific steps that you can use to apply these 4 aspects of volunteer management to your particular volunteer needs and to working with community volunteers. That being said, I do want to quickly just flag something here, which is the general recruitment template, and that does have some ideas for ongoing publicity, so you can take a look at that if that's something you're interested in. But for more targeted recruitment, which is what we'll focus on in terms of community volunteers and improving your volunteer program in general, you're going to want to start with position descriptions. So those are explained in this document that's circled at the top here, and then you can see there are some templates and examples which are in the folder below. So here's an example of a detailed position description template for a cooking shift. And as you can see, it includes not only the activities that the volunteer should expect to do, but also the purpose of the position and how they'll know if they're successful. In this case, that's probably a certain number of meals prepared by the group during the shift, any qualifications they need, the time frame, the benefits of the position, etc. You can then take a detailed outline like this and distill it down into a shorter message, like what I have at the bottom of this document, which might be more like what you would post online or copy into emails as you're publicizing this position. The more detailed description can be helpful not only for drafting these shorter messages, but also for using during interviews or orientations. So I do really encourage you to use a template like this to think thoroughly about all the different aspects of the position for which you're recruiting. So going back to the list of examples here, you can see there are also templates for other ongoing shifts and for shift leaders. And then in the leadership team section of the pantry, which I don't have a screenshot of here, but it's in the same volunteers and leadership team section, there are also some examples of position descriptions that you can use for leadership roles, which generally would probably apply to your leadership team during the school year, but if you need people to take on leadership positions over the break, those can be useful in that situation as well. So after you've drafted position descriptions, the next step is to come up with a recruitment plan. So this document here gives you an overview of what a recruitment plan is. And then in this folder here, you'll find a general plan that can also be used for leadership roles and a plan that's more targeted towards community volunteers. So as you can see, this template takes you through thinking about what groups you might reach out to, how you'll contact them, what materials you need, who's actually going to do the recruiting, all those types of questions. Then there's an example of a message that you could send out to people who you're hoping will spread the word. And there's also a link to another document on the pantry that has some tips for working with corporate volunteer groups in particular. Something that's going to be an important aspect of your recruitment plan is how you expect interested people to follow up with you. So you might put your email address for a volunteer coordinator, or you might put a link to some place where they can sign up for shifts online if you're recruiting for more regular shifts. I do want to mention here that there's a real advantage to using some sort of system like Volunteer Hub, which isn't specific to your campus when you're working with community volunteers. Many schools do have their own volunteer sign-up system, but for someone who's not a student or not part of the campus community, that can be a bit intimidating. So as a campus kitchen, you have access to Volunteer Hub, so you're welcome to use that, or something similar, a link where people can go to sign up and know that as a member of the community and not just of your particular campus, they're still welcome at your volunteer shifts. So now we're going to hear a bit from Paige again. Thank you, Paige. Some examples of how she's gone about recruiting volunteers in the community.
Great, yeah. So we've kind of recruited in a couple different ways, but mostly for the mobile pantry efforts, we have gone to different community meetings. So I think our town might look different than a lot of other places. So we're a pretty rural place. So we have a lot of volunteer fire departments. And so I've kind of gone to different fire departments around just to kind of talk about what we do, specifically with the mobile pantry, and asked folks if they're interested to contact me. I leave flyers and business cards, and generally have a point person for each place that I go, and then follow up with them if they know of any folks who are interested. Churches are a really big part of our recruitment as well. For the summer backpack program, we have different church groups that come each time, and so we have kind of a committee of a representative of each church who comes and kind of chats with myself and Jenny, who also works with me at the campus kitchen. And we also have a new initiative this semester, which was pretty cool, started by one of our leadership team members, which was bring your professor to the kitchen. So kind of working on campus rather than recruiting folks who just are kind of from here. So we had kind of an Instagram thing of with a hashtag, bring your professor to the kitchen, and folks were asked to kind of bring a new professor or a professor who's been to the kitchen before, and they're encouraged to bring their families. So those are just some of what we do.
Thanks, Paige. Those are some great ideas. And now we're also going to hear from Amanda, who's the coordinator for the campus kitchen at Marquette, who also has had some success with recruiting non-students on campus.
Yeah, we've had some really great experiences with our non-students on campus. One of the ways that we went about was to find, especially during our summer break or during school breaks, is to find the departments or a specific department that is on campus but not so busy that they can't send people to join you maybe once a week. We have a standing once a week volunteer spot. We usually have 2 people from the Department of Finance, which is like your bursar, the bursar's office, or and your accounts payable. Find the department that isn't so busy that they can't spare either a couple of regular employees, and they sometimes send their student employees because they always have student employees during the summer as well. Because we have, and we've been working with our finance department for about 5 years, and the head of the department really believes in what we do, so she actually allows her employees to volunteer, especially like her salaried employees, to volunteer during work time and not have to sign out. So it's sort of like part of it is their lunch break, but it's like they just get to take an extended lunch break and join us for a couple of hours in the kitchen during a time when we really need a few extra hands. Another department to look into is athletics. we have a student on our leadership team who is a member of our track team on campus, and she has reached out to athletics for us. So utilizing students who are a part of organizations that are on campus all the time is another great way to get new people from campus into the kitchen who aren't necessarily students. One of the things we found with athletics is that if a coach tells an athlete to be there, they will be there, and they will try to be faster and better than their friend because they're all competitive, which is something that we highly utilized during our Turkey-Palooza this year. And yeah, that's the bulk of what we've been doing. Are there any clarifications you want on that, Andrea, before?
Thanks, Amanda. That's great. Yeah, I think thinking about, like Amanda said, folks who are going to be on campus even when students aren't, and then also about the connections between students and non-students on campus, and really taking advantage of your student leaders to help you build out some of those connections and get more folks in the kitchen or involved in whatever way you need them to be. So thanks again, Amanda, for sharing. So now that we've talked about recruitment plans and kind of turning your position description into a message that you could, for example, copy into those emails you might be sending to department chairs or have your leadership team members send to their coaches, you're starting to get some interest, folks who want to volunteer with you. So what's the next step? It can definitely be tempting to just send everyone who comes your way straight to the kitchen, and that may be what you do a lot of the time, but particularly when you're working with community members who may not be as familiar with the campus kitchen as students, it's really a great idea to plan some time for a conversation where you can make sure you find a role that's a good fit for them. So this plan could be called a screening/matching or an interview protocol, but basically it's just a guide to remind you what to include in that conversation and give you a chance to plan some particular questions that will really help you get to know the volunteer, the potential volunteer, and get a sense of how they might act in different roles, particularly if they're going to be having more responsibility than in a typical kitchen shift. So here you can see the overview document that explains volunteer screening and matching, and also then some specific templates in the folder below that. And so this is just a quick overview of the elements of an interview because the template documents are a little long to put up on a slide like this. But really, you can just think of this interview protocol as a guide to a conversation. And these different elements are included in each of the templates that you can download and modify for your particular positions. So I do want to highlight on this slide the importance of those extra questions for anyone who might be involved in a leadership role or have some extra responsibilities outside of a typical shift. In addition to just finding out, what brought this person to the campus kitchen and what they're interested in doing, this is really a chance to think about where you might run into some problems or where problems have occurred in the past, and then try to craft some questions that will help you see how a potential volunteer would deal with some of those scenarios. So in that way, it can sort of feel more like a job interview, but you do want to really make the person feel comfortable, not like they're being tested or put on the spot too much, because even if you think that their responses to the more complex questions you're asking aren't exactly what you'd hope for, they might be a great fit for another role, or maybe they could even do well in this role if they had some more additional training. Which brings us to the final piece of this 4-step process, which is volunteer orientation and training. So there's actually another section in the pantry here under volunteers and leadership team, which is specifically about volunteer training. And then there are also some additional training resources for leadership roles under the leadership team section. So here on the volunteer training and orientation page, we've got a variety of resources from a very basic orientation script, which you could use at the beginning of any shift that has new volunteers, to a more detailed orientation plan for regular groups that you might do at the beginning of a semester or use with your leadership team, to a training plan that you can modify for anyone who needs something in addition to an orientation. So that could be leadership team members who need to learn the HACCP system or specific responsibilities for their roles, or anyone like a community volunteer who is doing some sort of specialized programming and needs training related to that. And again, when you're working with volunteers who are not students and may not be as familiar with the campus kitchen, you really can't assume anything about their background or knowledge about the campus kitchen and your programs. So it is really important to give them that thorough orientation and training so that they not only do what you expect them to do and feel supported in that work, but also really have a meaningful experience with the Campus Kitchen and can ideally become a sort of ambassador for your Campus Kitchen into the broader community. So we've gone over the 4 main steps of volunteer management, from drafting position descriptions to recruitment plans and messages, volunteer screening and matching, and orientation and training. And these steps are all definitely really important for working with community volunteers. So normally at this point in the presentation, I would probably ask for any questions. But since we're doing a recording, you can just email me your questions. I'll have my email address at the end. And I just want to finish with a reminder that while we really encourage you to think about implementing all of these steps when you're working with community volunteers, they're definitely valuable for student volunteers as well. So thinking again about what Amanda told us in terms of using your leadership team connections to branch out to additional organizations. We also heard from the Campus Kitchen at Northwestern about some success that they've had in connecting with other groups on campus that have similar missions. They have a lot of groups interested in food on campus, and then co-hosting shifts with those groups. So that can be something else to try. So thank you to everyone who's taken the time to watch this webinar, and please feel free to contact me or your program manager with any questions about these new resources or about volunteer management in general. And good luck.